Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Hi everybody, I am Muhammad Abu Bakr and in this video we shall be solving the Cambridge O level physics paper 2 from the October-November 2023 series variant 21 and this is the theory paper. It is quite lengthy than the MCQ paper and has greater time also. So let's start our video. The question number 1 is the figure 1.1 shows a toy water rocket. So, toy water rocket, okay. The rocket is half filled with water and connected by a rubber tubing to a pump. Air is then pumped into the rocket so that the pressure of the air inside the rocket increases. Explain in terms of particles why the air in the rocket exerts a pressure on the wall of the rocket. Now, this is the air pump and it is connected by a rubber tubing to this toy water rocket. This contains water along with the air. Now he asks us that uh, when I pump the air into the rocket, why is there a pressure on the walls of the rocket exerted? So the answer is quite simple actually. The particles of the liquid, the particles of the particles of the air collide with the walls. The particles of the air collide with the walls of the containers, so you can call this a container sometime. So these particles, they move randomly, they collide with each other and with the walls as well, and therefore when they collide they exert a pressure on the walls of the rocket. So the simplest answer would be that the particles of the air collide with the walls of the container, therefore they exert a pressure. So I'm gonna write that here. The particles of the liquid, so one second, the particles of the liquid, so particles of the air, sorry, the particles of the air collide with the walls of the container, and therefore exert a pressure on the walls rocket of the rocket as the particles move randomly. Gases have a Brownian motion, that's why they move in an irregular pattern, and that's why they exert a pressure on the walls of the container. So part 2 is the temperature of the air inside the rocket remains constant as air is pumped into the rocket. Explain why increasing the number of particles in the rocket increase the pressure of the air in the rocket. This is quite simple actually. You increase the number of particles. The number of particles, why does the pressure increase? Now if you increase the number of particles, there are more frequent collisions with the wall. So that's simple. In chemistry you have read that increasing the concentration means the rate of reaction increases. So similarly, if you increase the number of particles which try to act as the reactants here, therefore as a result the product here is the increase of the pressure, because more particles of the air collide with the walls, more collisions take place per unit time, and that's why there is an increase of the pressure. So that's your answer for this question. So I'm gonna write it here. More frequent collisions take place per unit time, and the time is the same. The time is the same. Take place per unit time because the number of particles has been increased. So there are more successive collisions, and that's why a greater pressure is exerted. So that's your answer to part two of question A. Part B, when the air pressure in the rocket is high, the rubber tubing is removed from the rocket. The water in the rocket is expelled downwards. Explain in terms of momentum why the rocket begins to accelerate upwards. Now, you have to apply the concepts of the forces and the momentum section of your textbook. So generally, the rockets and the jet engines work on the principle in which these hot gases, these hot gases, which are actually produced by burning of fuel in the larger rockets, in the space rockets, rush out with large momentum. Then, according to the law of conservation of momentum, the machines, or you can say the rocket, they gain an equal and opposite momentum, and this enables them to move with very high velocities. So that would be your answer. So now you have to put it here that the momentum of the water is expelled downwards. The momentum of the mm, the momentum of the water acts downwards. The momentum of the water acts downwards, and this causes an equal and opposite equal and opposite gain in momentum of the rocket, and it moves upwards according to the law of conservation of the momentum. Part C. As the water is expelled from the rocket, the upward acceleration of the rocket changes. So there's two reasons for the change in acceleration of the rocket. So you have to write down any of the two reasons. The first thing that comes in the mind is the gravitational field strength. So as you go upwards, the gravitational field strength decreases with height. What does this mean? That if by Newton's law F is equal to K Q1 Q2 over R square, now you are increasing the radius, you are increasing the distance from the earth, and that's why the gravitational field strength F would decrease here. And if F decreases, then by Newton's second law of motion F is equal to ma, then also if F changes, then acceleration of the body would also be altered. So the gravitational field strength changes with height, so you can write one of that. The second one you can write here, as it moves upwards, the air resistance starts to act on it. So that can also be a reason why the acceleration of the rocket changes. The third one is, now the water in the rocket is expelled downward. Now the water escapes from the rocket, and this causes a decrease in mass of the water and the rocket boat. So this can also cause a change in acceleration, but you have to write the best two. So you can write first of all gravity. So I'm simply writing gravity instead of gravitational field strength. Gravity decreases with height, and that is why acceleration this is why acceleration changes. The second best option would be to write about the air resistance, that a resistive force called the air resistance starts to act as you go upwards, and this also changes the acceleration. That's your answer to part question number 1. So we are done with this. Question number 2 is a lorry truck is at rest on a straight horizontal road. A constant driving force of 5.4 into 10 raised to power 4 Newton acts on the lorry and it accelerates forward. Describe what is meant by acceleration. Acceleration is defined as the rate of change of velocity. The rate of change of velocity is called acceleration. So that's the simplest answer you have to write. Part B, as a lorry moves forward, the work done on it is by the driving force. State the equation that defines work done. Refer to the direction of the force exerted. Work is equal to Fs, or you can write D instead of S. So F is the force. So I'm gonna write here F is the force is the force and D F is the force and D is the direction in in which the force acts. That's your answer. Part 2 of question B. Calculate the work done on the lorry by the driving force when the lorry travels with a distance of 280 meters. So you have to calculate the work done here. Work done is equal to Fs. So the force is 5.4 into 10 raised to power 4. 5.4 into 10 raised to power 4 in Newton, and you multiply this by 280. So the answer that we will get here is 15120 kilogram. So the answer, so you do the rest of the maths, so you will get about 1.5 into 10 raised to power 7 kilojoule, or you can write that as 15120 kilojoule. So that would be more appropriate. Part 3. At one point on the road, the kinetic energy of the lorry is 3.2 into 10 raised to power 6 joules, and its speed is 12 meters per second. 12 meters per second. So calculate the mass of the lorry. So the formula for kinetic energy, you all know, that is kinetic energy is half mv square. So kinetic energy is 3.2 into 10 raised to power 6, and I'm gonna multiply this by this 2, and I'm gonna divide it by the square of the velocity, 12 squared, and you will get the mass here. So I'm gonna put this into my calculator. 3.2 into 10 raised to power 6. And I multiply this by 2 and divide it by 144. So you will get 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. So you convert it into the scientific figures. The 4.4 into 10 raised to power 4 kilogram. 4.4 into 10 raised to power 4 kilogram. That's your answer. Part 3, question number 3. When the temperature of a liquid increases, the kinetic energy of the particles increases and the liquid expands. Explain by referring to particles why a liquid expands when heated. So why does a liquid expand when heated? So liquids expand when energy is supplied to them. The intermolecular forces of the liquid are weaker than the solids and they are easily broken down, and these intermolecular forces are responsible for the shape of the molecule and for holding them together. And once those intermolecular forces are overcome, the particles move much away from they were initially, and this causes the liquid to expand. So I'm gonna write that here. Liquids expand. Liquids expand when heated because the intermolecular forces. It is not the International Monetary Fund. It is the intermolecular forces because the intermolecular forces are easily overcome, and particles move away from each other. Particles move away from each other because energy supplied breaks their intermolecular forces strength. So that's gonna be your answer. This part. Part A. So part B. The heater in the kettle is near to the base of the kettle. The kettle is filled with the water of a temperature at a temperature of 17 degrees C, and the heater is switched on. So state the name of the method of thermal energy transfer that causes the energy to be transferred to the water that is touching the heater. So the water is touching the heater and the heater is heated. So what will happen here, that conduction take place. So you can simply write conduction. Conduction would take place here. So part 2, explain how thermal energy is transferred through all of the water in the kettle. Now how will the thermal energy transferred is that convection current would be established within the water. The cold water will sink and the heated water will rise, and this is the same principle on which the gliders fly in the air. The hot air rises upwards and the cool air sinks, and a convection current would be established. I'm gonna write it here. Convection current convection current is established within the water of the kettle as the cold water sinks. It drops down in the kettle, and the hot water, yeah, or you can say the heated water on the hot water rises. So that's gonna be your answer to this part. Part 3, state State the boiling temperature of the water and S standard atmospheric pressure. Include the unit in your answer. So water boils at 100 degrees C, or if you want it to Kelvin, you can add 100. You can add 273 to hundreds, or you can write. So you will get 373 Kelvin. Part 4. The kettle contains 2.5 kg of water at standard atmospheric pressure. The specific heat capacity of water is 4200 joules per kilogram centigrade. When the water reaches its boiling point, the kettle switches off. Calculate the increase in the internal energy of the water. Now I have to calculate the increase in the internal energy of water. So I will use the formula of specific heat capacity, which is Q is equal to mc delta T. And this whole formula will be applied here. The mass is 2.5. The value of C is 4200. And when the water reaches its boiling point, so subtract 100 from I'm going to subtract 17 from 100. The kettle is filled with the water at a temperature of 17 degrees C. So the initial temperature of water is 17 degrees C. So now you do the rest of the math. You multiply 2.5 with 4200 and you multiply this by 83. So you will get the answer 8.7 into 10 raised to power 5 joules. So that's your answer to question number 3. Question number 4. Red light of frequency 4.7 into 10 raised to power 14 hertz travels in the air at the speed of 3 into 10 raised to power 8 meters per second. Calculate the wavelength in air of this red light. So by the wave formula, we have V is equal to F lambda. So velocity divided by the frequency, you will get the wavelength. So you put the values 3 into 10 raised to power 8 divided by 4.7 into 10 raised to power 4 to 10 raised 0.7 into 10 raised to power 14. So the answer is, so your answer is 6.4 into 10 raised to power negative 7 meters. Part B. Figure 4.1 shows a narrow beam of red light striking the surface of a parallel sided glass block. State what happens to the speed, to the frequency, and to the wavelength of the light as it enters the blocks. Now, frequency is dependent on the source which produces it. So, frequency will remain same here. There will be no change in frequency. Now, it is traveling from a rare medium, just traveling from a rare medium, a shallow medium, to a denser medium. So the velocity and the wavelength both decrease, and you have done this in a ripple tank experiment. When water moves from shallow to rare, from rare to denser medium, when water moves from rare to denser medium, the speed and the wavelength both decrease. They both decrease. So part 3. Using the angles shown in figure 4.1, calculate the refractive index of the glass. So formula for refractive index is sine of angle of incidence over sine of angle of refraction. The angle of incidence is 45 and the angle of refraction is 30 degrees here. So sine of 45 divided by sine of 30, so you will get 1.41 here, 1.41 here, and it has no units because it is just a ratio of two angles. Part 3. The light continues along the path shown in figure 4.1 until it strikes the bottom surface of the block. Light then emerges into the air. Draw on figure 4.1 to show the path taken by the light until it strikes the bottom surface and the path of the light as it emerges into the air. So now I have to further on increase. Mhm. So the light, so you cannot draw a proper ray here. So the light is gonna in this traveling on this way, and here is the normal. So you draw a normal here. Mind my writing again. So now if you see here, when the light was traveling from a rare to denser medium, when it was traveling from rare to denser medium, it deviated somehow towards the normal. Now it is moving from a denser to a rare medium. So the light will move away from the normal. The light will move away from the normal. The light will move away from the normal here. So that would be the path of the light. Initially, it moved towards the normal, but now it will move away from normal because it is traveling from a denser to a rare medium now. So that's the end of question number 4, I guess. Question number 5. Most of the energy emitted by the sun is in the three regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. Part A, the name of one of these regions is the ultraviolet region, the UV region. Okay, state the name of all these three regions in order of increasing frequency. Smallest frequency, intermediate, and largest frequency. The largest frequency is of the UV region. Is of the UV region. They have the smallest wavelength. They have the smallest wavelength, and they have the largest frequency. The intermediate frequency, as we all know, is of the visible light. Visible light has intermediate normal frequency, and the smallest frequency, the greatest wavelength, is of the infrared region. Is of the infrared, the IR region. So that's your answer. Part 2. Some of the UV radiation emitted by the sun reaches the surface of the earth. Give one possible damaging effect of the UV radiation on the human body and the property of UV radiation that causes this damage. The damaging effect is mainly, you all know, is the skin cancer, which is caused in the areas where the ozone layer is damaged. Mainly in the Australia, it is found the most. So skin cancer major is the major cause of the UV radiation, and skin cancer is caused majorly by UV radiation, and the property which applies here, because the UV rays are ionizing. UV rays are ionizing, and they can cause mutation, or ionizing in nature, and they can cause unwanted mutation in the melanocytes. Melanocytes are your skin cells. So that's your answer. Part B, the electromagnetic radiation is a transfer wave. Describe the difference between a transfer wave and a longitudinal wave. Now, the transverse wave consists of the crests and troughs, and longitudinal waves consist of compression and rarefactions. But the main difference here is in the transverse wave. In transverse waves, in transverse waves, the vibration of particles is perpendicular to wave propagation. So that's the best answer, propagation. Whereas in the longitudinal waves, the vibration creation is parallel, is in the same direction to the wave propagation. In the longitudinal waves, in the longitudinal waves. So that's your answer to question number 5. So we have done half of the paper. Question number 6. Figure 6.1 shows a circuit that contains two identical cells, each of electromotive force 1.5 volts, that are connected in parallel. The circuit also contains two ammeters, a thermistor, and two resistors R and S. The reading on ammeter 1 is 0.20 amperes. State why the reading on ammeter 2 is also 0.20 A. Now this is a series circuit. And you all know that in series circuit the current remains the same. So the same phenomena is applied here. The current remains the same in series circuit. Part B, the resistance of R is 1.5 ohms and the resistance of S is 3.5 ohms. So calculate the resistance of T. So first of all, I will calculate the total resistance, the RT, the total resistance of this circuit, and then I will subtract the resistances of R and S. So I'm gonna write it again here. Calculating the total resistance in the circuit. So mind my spellings. Resistance, the circuit. So we're gonna first calculate a total resistance within the circuit, and then I will subtract the resistances of R and S, and I will figure out the resistance of this temperature dependent resistor. So by Ohm's law, I have V is equal to IR. So voltage is 12. Voltage is 1.5, and I divide this by 0.20 to get a total resistance. It's 1.5 divided by 0.2. So the total resistance RT is equal to 7.5. Now RT is equal to resistance of R, resistance of S, and resistance of T. So that is 5 ohms, the resistance of R and S, and the total resistance is 7.5. So you subtract 5 from 7.5. So 2.5 ohms is the resistance of T. So that's your answer. 2.5 ohms. Part 2, the temperature of T increases explains why the PD across T decreases. Now, now the temperature of T increases. T is a temperature dependent resistor which obeys this relation that if you increase the temperature then resistance will decrease. So as the resistance decreases, the resistance will decrease, and according to the Ohm's law you have V is equal to IR. So if I decrease the resistance, the voltage also decreases, the current increases. But there is also another thing, that the temperature, the PD across T decreases. So if you attach a galvanometer here, suppose a galvanometer here, then this gives a lower potential difference value because there is R and there is S here. These two resistors decrease the voltage. The two resistors decrease the voltage, and that's why there is a lower potential difference in in the temperature dependent resistor. So I'm gonna write it here. I'm gonna write it points instead. Resistance of thermistor decreases. Resistance of the thermistor decreases. That's the first thing. And then the current in the circuit increases because now the resistance decreases, current in the circuit increases. And the last thing is that PD across R and S is reduced. So these are all the three factors which contribute to the fact that why there is lower PD across T. PD across R, PD across R and S is reduced. So that's your answer to question number 6. Question number 7 from the electromagnetism chapter. An alternating current and AC is used in a remote location to supply electricity. Figure 7.1 shows the structure of a simple AC generator with a coil horizontal. So this is the horizontal coil. Q is the split ring. P are the brushes. These two are the brushes. Q is the split ring. These is the output terminal. These are the two magnets. So state the name of the components labeled P and Q on figure 7.1. Q is the split ring. Q is the split ring. And P are the brushes. There are two P's. So P are the brushes. So when the generator is producing an electrical output, P is stationary, the brushes are stationary, and Q is rotating. Explain the purpose of P and Q. The purpose of Q, the purpose of no sorry, the purpose of P, the purpose of P is to connect the output terminals. The purpose of P is to connect the output terminals, and the purpose of Q. What the purpose of the splitting, that it allows the reversal of the current it allows the reversal of the current. It changes the direction of the current as soon as the coil reaches the vertical position. So the purpose of Q is to allow the reversal of the current. So that's your answer. Part B, the output of the generator is connected to an oscilloscope. On the oscilloscope, the Y gain is set at 5 volts per centimeter and the time base is 2 milliseconds per centimeter. Figure 7.2 shows the trace on the screen of the oscilloscope. So now question 1 is B. The part 1 is write a letter X on the trace shown in figure 7.2 to indicate one point when the coil is vertical. So when the coil is vertical, there is zero amount of current induced in it. Means that there is zero amplitude. So the zero amplitude is on like this point, is on this point at the start of the graph on the x coordinate, or the now only the x coordinate, that would be better. So these 5 points, you can choose one of these and write a letter X, because on these points there is zero amount of current induced, there is zero EMF, and the coil is vertical. So part 2, using figure 7.2, determine the maximum value of the EMF produced by the generator. So that is quite simple actually. 1, 2, 3, and this is something like 3.6, I think. Yeah, 3.5. So the total number of boxes are here are 3.6. There are 3.6, and the Y gain set is at 5 volts. Is at 5 volts. So if one box is if one box is 5 volts, then I multiply 3.6 with 5. So the largest amount of EMF produced is 3.6 into 5, that is 18 volts. Part 3, using figure 7.2, determine in milliseconds the time it takes for one revolution of the coil. Time it takes for one revolution of the coil. So for the one revolution of the coil, so one complete revolution means that the body moves 2 times vertically and 2 times horizontally. So I'm gonna change the color first of all. So this pattern here to this point, from this point to this point, there is one complete revolution of the coil. There is one complete revolution of the coil from this point to this point, and there are 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 boxes here. The time base setting is 2 milliseconds per centimeter. So I'm gonna multiply 4 with 2 milliseconds. I'm gonna get 8 milliseconds. So that is the time for one revolution of the coil. Part 4, determine the frequency of the output of the generator. Frequency of the output of the generator. Now frequency is equal to 1 by t. Frequency is the inverse of time period. The time period is 1 over 8. It is milliseconds here, and this milli is gonna become kilo when it moves upwards. It is gonna become kilo, and there I have seconds here. So 1 divided by 8, 0.125 kilohertz. 0.125 kilohertz, or you multiply this by 1000 to get 125. 0.125 into 1000 and you will get 125. So the frequency is 125 hertz. So that's your answer to question number 7. Question number 8, uranium 235 is the isotope of a uranium that is used as a fuel in a nuclear power station. The isotope of uranium is that is most abundant in nature is uranium-238. State how a neutral atom of uranium-235 differs from a neutral atom of uranium-238. It has three lesser protons. It has three lesser protons. It differs in the atomic number, or it differs in the mass number. It has nucleon number, the mass number. It has three lesser protons. Part B, in the reactor of a nuclear power station, a nucleus of 235 uranium absorbs a slow moving neutron and undergoes fission. State what happens to the nucleus of an atom during fission. So during the fission, a heavy nucleus, a nucleus which is large in mass, splits into two, three, or many smaller nuclei depending upon the amount of neutrons. The slow neutrons about absorbed by it is disintegrated into smaller nuclei by absorbing low energy the slow moving electrons. He has already said the slow moving neutrons. So I'm gonna write it here. During fission, heavy nucleus, a heavy nucleus, a heavy nucleus splits, or you can say divide into smaller stable nuclei by absorbing slow moving, you can write in brackets, l- low energy electrons. So that's your answer to part one of B. Explain how fission can lead to a chain reaction in the reactor. So during what happens is that much number of neutrons are emitted, and more number of neutrons emitted can in turn trigger other nuclei, the other uranium nuclei, to undergo fission with the high probability of the chain reaction, and the reaction would be uncontrollable um, because more neutrons are emitted, more neutrons interact with more uranium atoms, and the reaction goes and goes and goes on until the uranium ends. So what will I write here is that more neutron more neutrons more neutrons emitted during the reaction can in turn trigger other nuclei to interact with the neutrons and undergo fission with high probability high probability of an uncontrollable uncontrollable chain reaction until all of the uranium 235 ends. So that's your answer. Part 3, state the purpose of the moderator. in the reactor. The purpose of the moderator is to slow down the reaction by slowing down the neutrons. The moderator slows down the energy, slows down the pace of the neutrons. Lessens it lessens the energy of the neutrons, and therefore it slows the reaction. The its purpose is its purpose is to its purpose is to slow down the reaction by slowing down the neutrons. So now explain the actions of the control rods in the reactor. So the control rods, they absorb neutrons, and they slow down the chain reaction. They do not end it, they slow down the chain reaction, and they itself do not involve in the reaction, as they only limit the number of fissions. So I'm gonna write it here again. They absorb the control rods, absorb the neutrons without on involvement, and limit the number of fissions. The control rods are generally made of graphite, which is quite inert. And if you want to check this about further, you can go to the YouTube and search about the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which happened because the control rods did not function as they were supposed to do. And you can watch a video on this, and this will further make you concepts about the action of control rods, the nuclear reactions, uh, clearer. So that's your answer to question number 8. Moving on to question number 9. I think this is the last question. Yes, it is. The planet Venus orbits the Sun at a constant speed of 3.4 into 10 raised to power 4 meters per second and takes a time TV to complete one orbit. So Venus is 1.1 into 10 raised to power 11 meters from the Sun. Calculate TV. So I have to find the orbital speed. The orbital period here. So the formula for orbital speed would be speed is equal to 2 pi r divided by time. Now I have to find time. So t is equal to 2 pi r divided by the speed. So you do the maths here. The radius is 1.1 to 10 raised to power 11. Multiply this by 2, multiply this by the value of pi, and you divide this by speed, which is 3.5 into 10 raised to power 4. The answer you will get here in scientific form is 2.0 into 10 raised to power 7 seconds. So that's your answer. That is the orbital period. Explain why speed is a scalar quantity. Speed is taken for distance. Speed is taken for distance which does not have a direction, or its direction continuously changes. We cannot figure out the direction of the distance. Speed is a scalar quantity. It does not have a direction, and it only gives the magnitude of the pace at which the body moves. Velocity is a vector quantity. Explain what happens to the velocity of the Venus as it orbits the Sun. Now, some of you might say that the velocity, you have already been given the velocity, but velocity actually changes every instant. Why velocity changes? Velocity is the combination of speed along with the set direction. So you also have to take the direction into account. When the sun is when the Venus is orbiting around the sun, its direction of travel is continuously changing. What does this mean? This means that its velocity is simultaneously changing. Its velocity changes because its direction of travel continuously changes. Its velocity changes because its direction of travel continuously changes during its journey around the sun. There is a resultant force on the Venus as it orbits the sun. The force is perpendicular to the direction of the motion of Venus. State why is this force needed? This is the centripetal force, which is needed to keep Venus in a circular track, or you can say to accelerate the Venus towards the center of the sun. The centripetal force keeps the Venus moving in a circular track. It does not allows it to escape. So the first purpose is to keep Venus keep Venus in a circular track, and obviously the second purpose would be to allow the acceleration of Venus towards the center of the sun. Accelerate Venus towards the center of the sun. Part 3. mm, Figure 9.1 shows the orbit of the Venus around the sun. On figure 9.1, draw an arrow to show the resultant force on the Venus. The resultant force on the Venus is towards the center of the sun. It is towards the center of the sun in this way. It is the resultant force. The acceleration is towards the center of the sun. The acceleration is toward the center of the sun. Then by force is equal to ma. Acceleration is only the vector. Then f would also be towards the center of the sun. State, and this is the direction in which Venus would move if I remove the sun from here. Then Venus will go in this way. State what causes the force acting on Venus. It is the gravitational force, the force of gravity, which causes the force acting on Venus. They both have the interaction by the Newton's law of gravity. F is equal to k q1 q2 over r square. So they both interact because of the force of gravity. Simply, if you even write gravity, that would be enough here. But it is the force of gravity. It is the force of gravity, mm, which causes the force acting on Venus. That's your answer. Part D. State now one planet in the solar system is closer to the sun than Venus. State the name of the planet. It is the Mercury, the closest to the sun. Compare the time that this planet takes to complete one orbit of the sun with TV and explain the difference. Uh, it will take less time, so the orbital period of Mercury would be lesser than Venus because it has is lesser than Venus because it has smaller circumference, high orbital speed. So that's your answer. It has smaller circumference. So formula for orbital speed is v is equal to 2 pi r over t. Now it has a smaller circumference, so it will have greater speed. If it has greater speed, then it will have smaller orbital period. So that's your answer. So that's all for our today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe and press the bell icon for upcoming videos and solve past papers. Goodbye. Allah Hafiz.